When you mention the year 1812 here in the United States, you think of the War of 1812, when we were back at it again with the Brits. But 1812 was an incredibly pivotal year, and a year when a bacteria really changed the course of history in Europe and maybe beyond. And that bacteria is the cause of typhus. And that delivery system for that bacteria is the louse. And the person who became profoundly affected by this bacteria and the louse is Napoleon. Napoleon had aspirations to conquer a portion of the world that would be similar in size to that of his hero, Alexander the Great. And he decided that in order to get to India, he was going to head through Russia with his army. He amassed a huge army, 660,000 men, of which 450,000 were his elite troops. And off he went. And as he went through Poland, his army picked up, because of the ravages that had already occurred in Poland, the louse infected with typhus. This disease is a sanitation disease. And of course, being an army, and at that time, not very sanitary conditions, the lice spread from one person to another in his army, and pretty soon his men were just debilitated with typhus. Of course, there was no cure at the time, no antibiotics that we have today. And within a short period of time, once typhus began to move through his army, in fact, in 1 month, he lost 80,000. By the time he got to Russia, his army was dwindling in size. And the Russians could see, I think, what was happening. And so they would just move a little bit ahead of him. And as he advanced his army, it just gave typhus that much more time to work on his troops. Eventually, he could see that his army was almost gone. He made a play for Moscow, but then had to retreat. And in the end, as he finally made it back, most historians say he had lost between 7 and 8 out of every 10 of his soldiers. He left with an army of 660,000 men. He returned with an army that was about less than 100,000. Of his elite troops, nearly 500,000, he came back with less than 25,000. And really, not many battles. There were a few inconsequential battles. He even won one of those. But it was the louse and the bacteria that it carried and the sanitation issues that really ended Napoleon's bid for conquest and changed the course of history in that part of Europe and maybe even into Asia if he'd been successful in going through Russia and into India. As a side note, one of Napoleon's other big issues was how to supply his troops with food, and that's really one of the issues that he had. His troops had to go out and scavenge in the surrounding areas as they traveled through, and that's where they began to come in contact with the infected lice. He sponsored a contest during that time, and he had a candy maker in France, Nicolas Appert, who developed canning as a way to preserve food. A little bit late for this conquest, for sure. Anyway, Napoleon done in by a louse and a bacteria.